All right, let's get the show started. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to InRhythm Lightning Talks. I'm your host, Parag Katkar. I'm the head of consulting practices at InRhythm, and we have several awesome lightning talks lined up for you in the upcoming weeks. Our lightning talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And each week, one of our practice area consultants shares their knowledge on evolving technology trends and the best practices in the industry so that you all can keep learning and growing in your career. And this week, Nathan Barrett, who is an SDET manager with us, is going to show us how to write really good test cases. I'm super excited about this talk. So without further ado, let's get it started, Nathan.
Cool. Hey guys, so like Parag said, my name is Nathan Barrett. I'm an SDET manager currently working on the Fidelity assignment. I have been doing quality work, starting out as a manual tester and then automation engineer and then automation lead, going up to manager since 2013. My first job out of college was at eBay. I started as a manual tester on the iPad app and then became an automation tester on that app, followed up by working on Android payments through the transition from PayPal to eBay's own payment processor. So I've worked on a ton of high priority automation projects there, then moved on to Nike with all their crazy internal and external projects, which was a ton of fun. So all that to say, there is a small chance that I know what I'm talking about here. This is going to be a very high level overview of, as the title suggests, writing a great test case or at least a pretty okay one. So if you're watching this the night before your final exam on components of a test case and what makes a good one versus a bad one, you can expect something in the C+ to B+ range. So we'll go over the contents really quick. What is a test case? What makes a good test case? How can we differentiate it from a bad one? Sort of a troubleshooting step, defining and writing test steps, expected results, and finally a conclusion so that we all know that the presentation is over. So what is a test case? To test means to establish the quality, performance of reliability or reliability of something, and case means case. And this concludes our intensive 2-week training. So in reality, a test case is a repeatable series of very specific actions designed to either verify success or provoke failure in a given product, system, or process. That's a lot of words. What do they mean? So essentially, a repeatable series of specific actions. This is a to-do list that we're going to run multiple times across a lot of different circumstances, designed to either verify success. Verifying success is what we call a positive test case, meaning that, say, we're going to enter the number 1, 2, 3, 4 on the keyboard, and then we want to see that 1, 2, 3, 4 shows up. That is a positive test case. We are verifying success. Or provoking failure. I have a calculator app. I insert emojis. I want to see whether or not I can try to subtract octopus from smiling poop. This is an attempt to provoke failure. We don't know how it's going to respond. We just know that it shouldn't allow me to do this stuff. In a given product, system, or process, fairly simple, product is sort of a standalone test, say within an app or a program or something. System across multiple products and, excuse me, kind of underlying within API levels and all kinds of other things, or process. It's not super typical to see, but I have seen people write test cases for their own development processes, which can be really cool. Some of the teams that I've been on in the past have actually run regression tests on their agile processes to make sure that they're following everything correctly. And I will say I've never seen a more confused but cautiously happy manager than when they were presented with a test run of the agile processes that had been run that sprint, and there were multiple failures where more meetings needed to be scheduled and stuff. So there's a lot that you can do based on test cases. A past test case functions like a receipt verifying the correct functionality of the subject of the test. This is really, really important. We need to understand as testers that a past test case is not a validation of, I looked at this and it looked good. It is essentially a binding contract that the requirements of the test have been satisfied and that there are no issues within the test. So this is something that you should be able to metaphorically take to the bank, or in the case of Fidelity, basically literally take to the bank. Test cases serve as our final verification of functionality before releasing to users. You don't have to feel like a Spartan holding up against the Persians to kind of keep the bugs at bay from all the users that obviously don't want bugs. But quality is this last step, and the last verification is the regression testing, right? So these test cases are essentially our last line of defense. So now we get into the meat. What makes a good test case? There are some required elements and there are some nice to haves. Not every test case will require the nice to haves, but every test case should require these required elements. Number one is a summary, fairly self-explanatory. Prerequisites, test steps, and expected results. We'll be diving into all of these kind of more in depth. Nice to have, we won't cover as in depth, but they are extremely valuable. Artifacts, these can be screenshots showing what the app looks like, builds that need to be installed, configuration files to load, anything that is ready to go that the user, the tester can use to replicate the test scenario. Additionally, there is test data. These can be accounts, they can be items for shopping apps, they can be addresses, whatever needs to be inputted into the app as data for it to satisfy the conditions of the test. And then something that I like to add that often gets left out is historical context. I always like to know previous times the test has failed, what the root cause was, previous user journeys. For our team, we use the term user journey to indicate where a user starts versus where they finish, right? So versus having a test where you just turn on a toggle in settings and verify that that works, the user's journey actually begins at login, where they log in successfully, they go to their profile, they go to settings, and then they go to that toggle, turn it on and off, and then they should be able to go back through the program and verify that that setting change has taken place. Previous user journeys would indicate, okay, these settings didn't used to exist under profile, they used to be on their own page. We need to be able to verify that they don't exist there. All of that context is really helpful in looking for bugs that you can kind of keep an eye out as you're running this kind of stuff. So let's start looking at these things in depth. So a summary. A summary is a concise and direct encapsulation of the purpose of the test case. It should communicate exactly what's going to happen in the test case, what we're testing, and essentially why, right? This is so that at a high level, we can see whether or not something needs to be run. So I have an example here. A bad summary, exhaust port is critical. Good summary, thermal exhaust shielding. Thermal exhaust port should reject foreign objects, including proton torpedoes. So we can think about some cases where this would be valuable. It doesn't look super high priority, so we don't need to run it, and I'm sure everything will be completely fine. What makes a good test case? We'll continue on with prerequisites. Prerequisites are really often overlooked and just communicated in test steps, but this is usually not the best way to capture them. Specifically speaking to X-ray, which is what we work in most of the time, or TestRail, any kind of test management tool, the prerequisites can capture what needs to be in place prior to starting the test. This can be an account type. This can be a specific state that the user is in. This can be specific network conditions. This can be specific devices. There's a lot of different prerequisites that can be captured, and they should all be described really, really thoroughly. One of the features that I love so much about X-ray is that you actually have separate tickets that are called prerequisites, where you can not only capture an explanation of the prerequisite, but steps on how to get an account to that state, steps on how to set up any kind of network conditions or mock them, potentially with like Charles proxy or something, and really, really get that granular information that's necessary for our ultimate goal, which is someone who has no familiarity with either the product or the feature to be able to come in and run the test and know if it passed or failed. So for example, bad prerequisites are captured in the test steps, right? So you say, rather than having it say, you should have an account that is of this type, step one would be log in with an account of type, blah, 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 blah. no information on what that account is, no information on how we get an account to that state, all that kind of stuff that makes it really, really difficult. Not present. This is a bad type of prerequisite. We need prerequisites present. A lot of the times I will come in and find a test that has no prerequisites whatsoever. This makes it really difficult to know what our starting point is and to see if we're seeing a legitimate failure or not. Other bad types of prerequisites, I don't see this one as much, but I have seen it in the past, is overly specific. So for example, user should be located in the US, user should have this account age, should be in this device orientation, should have this specific OS. All this stuff is really, really valuable, but it's something that could be captured more easily and better at a test run level rather than a test case level, right? We want our test cases to be repeatable so they can be run across a variety of circumstances, but still capture a very specific use case of our product. Examples of good prerequisite qualities are they are concise, they are descriptive. Ideally, I want to be able to read a prerequisite, know exactly what it is and what I need to do, and it needs to describe what is going to be set up. It should lay out everything that needs to be set up prior to the test starting, and it should include information to learn more if desired. This is a really helpful one, and the main reason that why I like the X-ray setup is that it's essentially a separate ticket that you can click into with what really is a Confluence page, right, of data that sets up this prerequisite and kind of what's going on. So we can go on to an example here. This would be an example of some bad prerequisites. Short, prior experience. Good prerequisites would be user should be a halfling, user must be in the Baggins family, user should be familiar with the Ring of Power, user should have supervision. These blue texts would be links to documentation. You can see that from our first batch of prerequisites, we get several candidates, and from our second, we kind of only have we really just have one. We can see how this kind of stuff would go poorly if we followed the bad prerequisites. Moving on to test steps. Test steps are the meat of the test case. This is why I wanted to do this presentation. Good test steps require that each step is a specific atomic action. What I mean by atomic is as small and precise as possible, performed by the user and contains an expected result. It is not good practice to have test steps that are a series of tasks that need to be completed, followed by a final assertion. I need to know, as someone who, remember, our ultimate goal is coming in and running the test with no prior knowledge of the feature or the program itself, I want to know at every step that I am performing the step correctly. Something could break along there, and I want to know about it when it breaks rather than at the end when I don't end up where I'm supposed to be. Expected results are really important. I'll cover that in another slide. Steps should call out divergent paths where necessary. So this is in a case where there are multiple possible functionalities. Ideally, this would be covered by prerequisites, but remember that the people running this may not have the knowledge that you have. So calling out where if you see this could be the issue is really, really valuable, saves a lot of time, and improves our coverage quite a bit. Steps should cite which test data laid out in the prerequisites needs to be applied. If we have prerequisites full of test data, that is super, super helpful. If we need to access that during the test, this is where we can call that out, right? So rather than enter account information, enter the personal brokerage account information from prerequisites. This kind of stuff is really, really helpful. This one I put in bold and underlined because I think it's really important, and I think that we have this tendency to say, people will just understand what I mean. Good test steps treat you like an idiot. Really, really solid test steps should assume that you know nothing and communicate everything. If I have never opened Facebook before and I open up one of their test cases, I should still be able to invite people to an event or something. It should be so clear that an intern on day one should be able to run all of our tests. Or at least that's how I feel about it. So this is an experiment. This is actually what I wanted to do for my presentation first, but then I realized I'm not allowed to assign you guys homework. So you're welcome. I just put it in an experiment. So first, I do this in interviews a lot because it's a really good way to see how people think about this kind of stuff. Try writing out the steps to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, just like you would write out a test case or any kind of recipe, right? So prerequisites, what ingredients should we have? What tools are we going to need? What kind of stuff do we need set up in our kitchen? Then once you've written out all of your steps, right, have someone who hasn't read the steps perform only the actions explicitly stated within the steps. Oftentimes, and then step 3 is see how far you get. Oftentimes when I do this, there are fundamental steps missing because we're not able to put ourselves in the shoes of someone approaching something for the first time and needing all that additional context. I've had people in interviews forget to tell me to get bread, forget to tell me to open the bread, forget to tell me to open the jar, forget to tell me that the peanut butter should be spread on the bread. Forget to tell me that I need jelly in the first place, and finally forget to tell me to put the bread together. If I could have all the stuff laid out in front of me and follow it exactly, I would. But this can be a really interesting thought experiment to make sure that your tests are actionable by someone with zero context and background information. Finally, we're going to come to expected results. How do we know that the test hasn't failed? A lot of times this is covered by a final assertion. And we, like I said before, we just have several test steps and a final assertion to make sure that things are working correctly. This is not as good as it could be. If we have expected results at every single step, then we know what's going on and we know that things are functioning correctly through the step. This is extremely valuable information so that we know about failures as soon as possible and we can potentially catch bugs that we wouldn't otherwise catch. So bad expected results look like this. Page loads correctly. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what correct is. I can't reference that explicitly. View looks good. I've seen that one before. That's the same issue. App behaves as expected. These are all really, really vague and up to interpretation. We don't want that. We want specificity and we want very, very, very clear acceptance criteria and expected results. Ways that we can improve that with our good expected results: landing page loads after spinner with users' account details present. That's great, right? The account details may shift. We don't want to have breakable tests, but this communicates exactly what I need to be asserting to know that I completed the step correctly. View renders with title, subtitle, price, item description, quantity. I know everything that I need to look at, and I know when I should file a bug because something is missing there. Additionally, toggle changes state when tapped, enabled to disabled. Correct. This is a great way to write acceptance criteria and expected results. When I interact with something, this is the expected result of that interaction is really what it boils down to. Apparently that didn't change. Yeah. So here's our expected result versus what's actually happening. We want to make sure that we're capturing this barbecue pit kit failure accurately. And finally, we're going to come to our nice to haves. These are not necessary, but they provide a lot of value. I would not reject a test case that didn't have this stuff, but I would request that it be added. Artifacts, files, screenshots, references, documentation. These are all just pieces that let us know the broader context and potentially speed up our setup, right? This should teach me exactly how I can fulfill the prerequisites. This should show me what the expected results look like. I should be able to access this stuff and very clearly gain a deeper, or very quickly gain a deeper understanding of the test case that, that we're working on here. Sorry, in the background, my son woke up from his nap and he does not sound particularly happy about it. Test data, what information is going to be needed during the test? Pre-rendered prerequisite fulfillment. So for example, if I need an account of a certain type, test data, give me that account. Give me an account that satisfies those requirements. Give me an item that satisfies those requirements. Let me know what I need to search for something particular to show up. Information that's needed during the test. This can also be things like addresses. You know, if we're testing, hey, a user in the US shouldn't be able to enter an address that's in France. Give me a French address to save me the time of having to go find one myself and Google Hilton's in Paris so that I can access this stuff alone and get it done, again, Our main goal here is that someone completely new to the project with no prior knowledge can run this in isolation correctly and know whether it passed or failed. And again, like before, historical context. Has this feature been flaky in the past? What are common failure points? And how critical is this feature? This will let me know really like where we should be running this test, how often, all of that stuff that helps in planning. Why are we not switching there? So in summary, we have our required elements and we have our nice to haves. This is all stuff that we need. This, to me, is what makes a good test case. It has the summary, it has prerequisites, it has test steps, it has expected results. It breaks through what we're doing here and tries to either break or assert the success of the app, right? We want to assert success or failure in those current states. Nice to have, we have our artifacts, test data, and our historical context. So this, to me, is what makes up a good test case. Thank you guys for sitting through the presentation and all of the little pictures that I like to put in.